What's going on, knuckleheads? Welcome to the show. This is our Shakur Stevenson versus Felix Caraballo post-fight reaction discussion. You know, just an absolute virtuoso technical performance from Shakur Stevenson over a outgunned, outmatched, basically hopeless Felix Caraballo. The guy landed a total of 18 shots throughout the entirety of the fight. And it's something that we've grown to expect since boxing, so we won't dwell on it for the first half of this show for too long. But, Shakur Stevenson went in there and did what he had to do. Again, virtuoso performance. He was very technical. He kept Caraballo on the outside. Unfortunately for Caraballo, he had no idea on how to use his jab in order to come in. Stevenson kept stepping back and catching him on the way in. Just landing wonderful combinations, head, body, head, going back and forth. He mentioned in the post-fight interview that he noticed Caraballo was not going to get out of there through headshots. He couldn't get him out of there via headshots. So what did he do? He switched it up to the body, and he landed a perfect, a perfectly timed body shot on Felix Caraballo. As Caraballo was opening up to throw his own punch, Shakur Stevenson basically landed a sort of body, hook / uppercut hybrid right on the liver or the solar plexus, somewhere in between. I think at first they thought it was on the liver. Subsequently, Timmy Bradley says, that was on the solar plexus. Regardless of where it landed, I think it was a beautifully placed shot. In my opinion, it was probably closer to the liver. You saw Caraballo fall to the floor, wincing in pain, writhing in pain. The referee saw enough, just stopped the fight right there. So I guess it was considered a technical knockout. But nonetheless, a beautiful performance by Shakur Stevenson. Something that was expected. To be honest with you, Caraballo landed a few shots. Shakur Stevenson felt like he was hit with more shots than he should have been hit with. However, 18 shots being landed over the course of 6 rounds is just absolutely insane. Here's a kid who, is being touted as the next Floyd Mayweather Jr. I think it's for good reason. I do think he has the skills, and I do think he's a likable fighter. And he just did what he was supposed to do tonight. There was nothing really more to it. If you ask me, of course, if you're asking me as a promoter, did I think that, or do I think this is the kind of fight that should be made? No, absolutely not. This is a guy in Caraballo who had never fought outside of his native Puerto Rico. He had no kind of competition that would have prepared him for a guy like Shakur Stevenson. He had nowhere near the amateur background that Shakur Stevenson has. But this is the sort of thing that they've been selling to the boxing public for so many years. It's kind of been forced down our throat as fight fans who enjoy the sport of boxing. And unfortunately, until something comes around to change this culture, it's just going to keep happening. And when you ask me what I mean by this culture, and I guess, this is the part where I mentioned I wanted to get into this later on in the show. What I mean is this, typical A side versus B side kind of, tomato can crushing, for lack of a better phrase, sort of trajectory that they put every boxer's career on. They start them all off 5-0, 10-0, 15-0, whatever, get them sold to a promoter, and, they continue to build up their career until they get to a point where, they're able to actually fight somebody with a pulse. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate what happened to Felix Caraballo today. I think if you're actually a fan of the sport of boxing, a hardcore fan, you don't fall for this kind of thing. You enjoy the spectacle, you enjoy the sport, but when you see a guy in Felix Caraballo who had never in his entire life left Puerto Rico for a fight, fly into the United States for the first time in front of the big lights in Las Vegas to take on a young prospect touted and a young champion touted as the next Floyd Mayweather, I think if you have any sort of conscience, you have to start, questioning what's going on with the sport, why this level of corruption. I mean, there's really no other word for it. It's corruption. And we kind of saw, we saw it emulated several times throughout the night. I mean, again, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of boxing. I love boxing, and I think these guys did what they had to do. Perhaps these are the only opponents they could find for them. But I would much rather seeing a sport where guys fight guys that are at their level or at their caliber. So I mentioned it was emulated earlier on in the night. I mean, you had Robeisy Ramirez take on a guy named Yuri Andujar, right? And Andujar, was TKO'd in one round by Robeisy Ramirez. And Robeisy Ramirez, interestingly enough, we talked about him with Manny Robles on Monday, which was yesterday. We talked about him with Manny Robles yesterday. He's the guy who actually beat Shakur Stevenson in the Olympics, and he's kind of had the same experience as a Vasily Lomachenko, where he lost his his professional debut. So I guess sometimes, this whole kind of getting guys to, a tomato can to crush and trying to build up their career, sometimes it backfires, as was the case with Ramirez, who lost his fight. But he didn't lose this fight tonight. He went up against a guy who really, didn't have a shot, if you ask me. And he got the TKO win in one round. Quantavious Cash fought tonight. I think he's a guy who trains out of the Mayweather Boxing Club. He had a much tougher fight. He went 6 rounds with a guy named Calvin Metcalf. And that was a more exciting fight. It went to a decision. Not the crazy mismatch that we're kind of used to on these, on these other fights. And we'll get into that right now. In Guido Vianello versus Donald Hainsworth. I mean, Vianello is this 26-year-old, 6'6" Olympian from Italy. Seems pretty talented. He's now 7-0 with 7 knockouts. Apparently he's training with Tyson Fury. He looked pretty good. He had some good movement in there tonight. I've actually seen him fight in person. And he looked good at the fight I saw him at. But tonight he looked even better. Unfortunately, though, I mean, we can't really gauge where he's at, as mentioned to us by the broadcasters. Hey, I'm not saying anything that's out of line here. I mean, it's the broadcasters themselves who said, you can't really gauge where he's at considering the level of opposition that he fought. The guy didn't last one round. He TKO'd Donald Hainsworth, who, with all due respect, looked like a bus driver, a 37-year-old club scrapper, according to, the internet. The guy looked like a bus driver in there, and he was fighting a chiseled, Italian Olympian in Vianello, and he got put out in one round. And it's not the kind of level of competition that you would expect somebody in Vianello to be up against. You would expect a bit more of a challenge for him. I think especially going forward, they need to put him in there with a more challenging opponent, somebody who's going to maybe at least try and test him a little bit. Then you have Jared Anderson. This is a kid I'm actually really excited about. Jared Anderson TKO'd a Johnny Langston in 3 rounds. Langston was 8-3 with 3 KOs. Langston kind of, came to fight. He could fight a little bit. They were saying that he's a cruiserweight. He had moved up to heavyweight against Anderson, who's the natural heavyweight. But Anderson, my goodness, athletic, a massive, chiseled 20-year-old that's 6'4", 236 pounds. 6'4" sounds pretty big, but, in the heavyweight division, that's pretty average at this time. That being said, though, he does look, fit. He looks athletic. He was busy in there. He was exciting. I think that's what set Jared Anderson apart from everybody else tonight. Guido Vianello, we didn't really have a chance to see if he's exciting or not. He did land that crushing knockout punch against, this bus driver looking guy, but we couldn't really gauge whether Vianello's an exciting fighter or not because they put him in there with a bus driver. Robesi got the TKO so quick, we couldn't really see much from him. And, I haven't been able to really see much from them at all to gauge them. But I think Jared Anderson is a guy who could be very marketable because Jared was actually very busy in there. He was walking down a tough Langston. And I say tough, relatively speaking, right? Because this was the toughest opponent on the card. And make no mistake, there were babies on the card and there were opponents on the card. Jared Anderson was the baby on this one. Langston was the face or the opponent. And but Langston did have enough skill to kind of stay in there for 3 rounds. And I think that made Anderson more exciting, or rather we got to see how Anderson reacts, and he reacted in an exciting way. He came forward, he threw a lot of punches for a heavyweight. He kept coming at Johnny Langston. The only thing I would say is from a technical standpoint, he wasn't always protecting himself. He kind of went in there carelessly against Langston a couple times. He got hit with some shots that he definitely, wouldn't typically want to get hit with. But that being said, I think perhaps he did that to make the fight exciting. I think he felt like he was just a much bigger, stronger guy, and he wanted an exciting, gritty win, and he just went forward and bashed up Johnny Langston. So, I don't have any problem with Jared Anderson's performance unless that's him at his, technical best. If that's him at his technical best, he's definitely going to have to tighten up quite a bit. But I think if he was doing that just to entertain, which a part of me believes maybe he was doing it to entertain, he's a very exciting guy. He's a very exciting guy. He's strong. He's pretty fast. He throws punches in bunches. He comes forward. That's the kind of thing boxing fans are going to want to see. And he basically broke Langston. He didn't hit him with one shot that finished the fight. He didn't win the decision. He won by TKO by breaking the guy, by just coming at him, pressure, punching him, beating him up, and breaking him. And, of course, Langston was the smaller guy. This is kind of to be expected, as were the other fights. But, I thought it was a good performance from Jared Anderson, who improves now to 4-0 with 4 knockouts. He does look like a legitimate prospect. And we'll have to wait and see how his career develops. He's another guy who is training supposedly with Tyson Fury. So we'll see how that goes. But, I guess back to the main event of the evening, which is Shakur Stevenson. Shakur picked up an easy win tonight. He did what he was supposed to do. Apparently, he hurt his left hand. So there may have been some adversity there that he overcame. But nothing exceptional. Nothing exceptional. So if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, the bell notification icon next to it. Join Knucklehead Nation. Anything you guys donate or purchase from the links below or donate to the super chat gets reinvested right back into the promotion and helping us build a promotion with integrity where we match guys evenly, and you don't kind of see what you're seeing in boxing here where guys are being fed to sharks. Part of me really did feel bad for Felix Caraballo, who flew all the way out from Puerto Rico during this pandemic, probably trained, and was thrown in there against a guy he had no shot against. That's the kind of thing that's sort of heartbreaking if you've got any sort of conscience, and I hope people start to see that and understand that. Not to take anything away from Shakur Stevenson. I think a lot of people at this point, at his weight, regardless of the experience, he would beat. But it's just sad for me to see a guy like Felix Caraballo who knows, maybe dedicating his life to the sport of boxing, get destroyed like that in his first outing in the United States. You want to see people kind of developed, and by developed, I mean placed in there against people that are on their level. And Felix Caraballo was certainly nowhere near Shakur Stevenson's level. In fact, I've never even heard of Felix Caraballo. Give me a second here, guys. So let's see what's going on in the chat, Knuckleheads. Appreciate you guys joining me. We've got Raw Dog. What's going on, brother? He said, shoulda replayed the sound he made from the body shot. Yes, man, that was a vicious body shot. The guy was definitely in a lot of pain. But again, I mean, a guy who really, I'm not sure if he deserved to be in there against Shakur Stevenson. Fight Life Nation says, my first time seeing Stevenson. Hard to get a read on him because his opponent didn't look like he was near the same class. And you're absolutely right about that, Marco. This was a guy who was nowhere near the same class as Shakur Stevenson. A guy with, basically a bunch of people you've never heard of on his resume. That's not to say that Shakur Stevenson is beating world beaters, but Shakur Stevenson is an Olympic silver medalist, training with some of the best in the world, an extensive amateur background. Now he's at, 14 fights. He's an experienced young champion now, and, he's hitting his stride, and having him in there against a guy like this guy. I forgot his name already. I forget. Caraballo. Having him in there with a guy like Caraballo, it's just unfortunate. But again, congrats to Shakur Stevenson on his performance. Fight Life Nation says, I didn't like the ESPN crowd noise. It was totally unnecessary. Liked the overall presentation, but the matchups were not competitive. And this is what you're going to get from boxing. I've been saying it on this channel for years. It's kind of why we call our podcast with Manny Robles the Keep It Clean podcast. It's because this sport needs to be cleaned. I try to keep things clean as a promoter on FightersRep, the only pro kickboxing promotion in the entire state of California. I try my best never to have matchups like what we saw tonight. You want to have even matchups when you're a fight promoter and a fight fan, because that brings out the best in the fighters. That allows for dramatic fights, competitive fights, exciting fights, not guys getting knocked out, in the first round. I mean, we had, 2 or 3 knockouts in the first round on this very limited card. So that's what you get from boxing, and it's unfortunate. It really is unfortunate. That's why you've got a lot more sort of jaded boxing fans than you do UFC fans. I think the UFC does a much better job pitting guys together that are more deserving to be fighting each other. And that's definitely something that the UFC has as an advantage over boxing, is that they're not really trying to fool their fans as much as boxing promoters. Although they do it too. I mean, they have their gimmicky fights here and there, but in boxing, it's become part of the recipe for boxing. It has become the culture. And for me, I bring it up because it's sad for me. I don't want to see fighters dedicating their lives to a sport just to get fed to sharks, just to be fodder for these fighters that are getting built up. Where's the honor in that? Where's the integrity in that? How could you be a fan of the sport and of fighters and appreciate something like that? That's something I don't like. That's why I let you guys know, if you want to continue to support us by buying a shirt, man, please get a shirt below in the description. It means a lot. It's your way to contribute to us continuing to build a fair promotion with integrity. And I think if you guys tune in and watch all our free fights, you'll see that most, if not all, our fights are very competitive. And I don't do the mismatch thing. Not my thing. Let's see here. So Marco says, Top Rank to me missed an opportunity to capture new fans when there is no other major sports competing against them. I don't think, I think you're right, Marco. I don't think that you are going to compel or captivate a brand new audience by putting fights that are mismatched to that extent together. I don't see how that captivates an audience. I mean, I understand the excitement of knockouts, and I love knockouts, and I appreciate knockouts. But knockouts mean so much more when they're earned and when they're deserved, or when you're fighting guys on your level. I mean, the guys tonight were nowhere near their opponent's level. And I think they were saying that Shakur Stevenson's opponent landed 18 shots on him throughout the entire, I believe it was 6 rounds that the fight went on. I mean, that's just, that's terrifying. That's terrifying. Stevenson didn't lose a single round. He actually had a 10-8 round in the first round, and I wish I could. Here they are. So I found you guys some statistics. Stevenson was so dominant. He outlanded Caraballo by a margin of 121 punches to 18. I mean, even me, right, as a promoter, I put fights together. And, this is at the amateur level more so than the pro level, where you have the sanctioning body. They check your fights to see if the fights are fair. You know what I mean? And when you have a situation like this, where, Caraballo came into this fight with 16 fights. He was 13-1-2 or something like that. And then Shakur Stevenson also has 13 fights. I guess there's an argument that, hey, they have about the same amount of professional fights, let them in there. But, a sanctioning body, at least like the ones I deal with here in California, I mean, they check you for that. They tell you, hey, this guy has 1 million fights. This guy has none. How are you putting these guys in the ring against each other? And, I mean, where do you see that disparity in skill more than when you look at the CompuBox statistics and it tells you that Shakur Stevenson landed 121 punches to Caraballo's 18 punches. He also connected, and I remember this off the top of my head, on 53% of his punches, I believe they said. More than 50% of his power shots, rather. So Shakur Stevenson was just teeing off on this guy. He was just teeing off on this young man, and I really hope that, it was worth it. I hope the pay was worth it for Felix Caraballo. I hope somebody, at some point gives him another chance if he's looking to do this full time. If he's just looking for a payday to get in there and get beat up and collect some money, fine. I guess there's a place for those kind of guys too. But, when I see this kind of thing, 121 punches to 18 punches, it bothers me, man. It bothers me, especially when, I believe it was in 2019, we had 4 boxers at least that died. You know what I mean? So these are not the fights I appreciate. And I am coming from a place of a hardcore fan. Listen, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. You know what I mean? I tell it like it is. I'm not beholden to anybody. I have sponsors that they can support me or they can not support me, and they all support me so far. But I don't brown nose anybody. I don't have to lie for anything. I just say whatever the hell I want to say. And I don't think it's right, man. I don't think it's right. I think it puts people's lives in jeopardy when you have mismatches like this. Anyway, let me continue. The 2 heavyweights looked good and are still green, but why televise their fights if they're against bums? Marco, they just, they wanted to advertise the easy knockouts. I mean, they want to advertise these knockouts. They want to build Vianello. They want to build Anderson. I mean, these are 2 guys that are marketable, and putting them out there in front of the casual fan and letting them annihilate, a couple, bus drivers or, Denny's employees or whatever these guys were that they were fighting, it excites maybe a casual fan here and there. But we see it for what it is as hardcore fans. And regardless, at the end of the day, you're still right. putting guys in there in a competitive fight and bringing out the best in them and making a dramatic, exciting, fun fight, at the end of the day is always going to be better. I mean, I'm not saying, look, if you guys want to continue with this recipe on building up boxers, you want to continue and perpetuate this culture of A-side and B-side fights and feeding guys to sharks, by all means, go for it if that's what you want to do. I'm not doing it. But by all means, go ahead and do it. But at least if you're going to do it, put somebody in there that at least looks the part or can last more than a few rounds or is at least slightly more competitive than what we saw tonight. I mean, we saw human punching bags tonight. Human punching bags. Top Rank feels like a dinosaur. They have the television contracts, but they don't seem to have the roster of, say, an Eddie Hearn, and they don't seem to play nice with other promoters. Well, Tyson Fury is a Top Rank guy. They were able to make the deal with Deontay Wilder and PBC. Also, they've got Lomachenko. They've got a lot of talent. They've got Teofimo Lopez. So they're just as competitive as most of the boxing promoters. Maybe a notch under Eddie Hearn, I would say. To be honest, as far as the American boxing promotions, Top Rank is probably the best. Maybe, with PBC being close by, and then I don't know who you'd rank after that. Maybe Golden Boy, I don't know. But Top Rank really is kind of, the one doing it the biggest right now here in the United States. Let's see here. But you're right. I mean, it's an old, tired formula, And with all due respect to Bob Arum, I mean, he's a guy who's been in the game forever. And he found a formula and he's sticking to it. And to each his own, man. To each his own. You know what I mean? It's just not something that I would do. It's not something that I would do. I got too much respect for these guys. I got too much respect for these guys that are going in there and fighting. I'm a promoter. I'm supposed to respect the fighters, But even if I wasn't, I'm a human being. I respect people. And as long as they respect me, I respect them, Even sometimes when they don't respect me, I respect them just as human beings, I don't, I couldn't do that to somebody. Put them in a situation where they're just going to get crushed like that. I don't like it. RGN's in the Granite says, getting one this week, George. Been so busy. Getting a t-shirt, maybe more. I'd like to get rid of some here on the Northeast Coast. Man, that would be super dope, RGN. Appreciate you. Bobby Nizzo in the house. One of the realest guys we get on this chat. Much love to you, brother. I appreciate you being in here, man. I'm wondering if you caught that. I'm wondering if you caught those fights, man. It was horribly mismatched today, man. Horribly mismatched. And by the way, the phone line's open if you guys want to call in. Not sure if it's going to work or not. It gave me a little bit of trouble last time, but it's there if you guys want it. Fight Life Nation says, hi, UFC to me does the much better job of promoting their fighter roster. You're invested in guys who are buried deep on the undercard. We need a boxing promoter to invest in his roster. I agree with that. That way you can see a ladder that fighters have to climb. Think about last week's pay-per-view. I agree with that too. The UFC is doing a great job, man. They got their little ranking system going on. They got their own ranking system. They're not beholden to 25 different sanctioning and regulatory bodies the way boxing is. It is good to an extent that there's a lot of regulatory bodies and sanctioning bodies in boxing, because it does give guys more of an opportunity to become champions. But when you do become a champion, until you unify, we don't know who the best is. So I guess that's the drawback there. And also, while people don't like the UFC, because they kind of view it as a tyranny, I mean, sometimes it's good for one person to be in charge as opposed to 25 people being in charge. I mean, that's why you have the issue you have with boxing. All these different promoters, they don't want to work together. They're protecting their fighters. That's why the best can't fight the best. That's why the best can't fight the best, because there's no point in making that happen. It's actually a disincentive to make that happen, because promoters don't want their golden gooses to get a loss on their record. So that's the deal there. By themselves, the bantamweights probably couldn't sell, but they all had backgrounds and storylines. O'Malley's the up-and-comer Garbrandt was at a crossroads, and Aldo was versus Sandhagen was a number one contender. Aljo, rather. You can explain that to a non-fan or a casual and keep them interested. I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. You know, again, the UFC is doing it right. A lot of people complain about their pay structure. You know, I'm not sure about the details of the pay structure. I can't really opine on that. What I'll say is, as far as giving the fans what they want, promoting their guys, making the best fights, the UFC does a much better job than boxing. I mean, it's a rarity. Excuse me, it's a rare treat when, as boxing fans, we get the fights that we want. It's a rare treat. I mean, look, people begged for Mayweather-Pacquiao for 10 years until it happened 5 years too late. You know, Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder only happened because Deontay Wilder's team probably thought Tyson Fury was not going to be the same guy coming back from 3 years on cocaine and you know, McDonald's and whatever else he was doing. There's, you know, 9 times out of 10, you're not getting the fight you want to get. You know, Canelo went and fought Kovalev, who, you know, was still beaten up from his fight against Anthony Yard, and, you know, was kind of already over the hill and didn't really have a shot, you know. So and the Canelo was basically picking the weakest guy light heavyweight when he fought Kovalev. So that's the kind of thing that we're getting from boxing, and it's important to continue to call that out. It's important to continue to call that out because a lot of the guys are going to get upset that this kind of thing is happening. Let's see. Looks like Marco Martinez is calling in. What's going on, brother?
What's going on, George? All right, so I don't know, when you lived in Miami, because you're from the East Coast, right? You grew up on the East Coast? Or?
That's correct. I'm from Miami, Florida. Yeah, brother.
Okay. Were you familiar with the Clippers, like pre-Blake Griffin? I feel like boxing is happy being the Clippers pre-Blake Griffin. When the Clippers got Blake Griffin and they got Chris Paul, they became a fun team to watch, and you can kind of like them. You know, it's not my cup of tea, but I was into them for a while because they were kind of fun to watch and it was exciting. Before then, they lost every year. They were considered one of the worst franchises ever, but they made a lot of money. They made a profit. One thing about Donald Sterling, he made a big profit. And I just feel like boxing's happy with that. They put on these fights, and I know they're getting money from ESPN, and it's just, I'm watching it now, and how do I go to work and talk about the fights? You know, like, how do you say, hey, did you watch those fights last night? And then what do you talk about? Like, yeah, there was nothing exciting for water cooler conversation.
I couldn't agree with you more, Marco, you know, and for those of you that don't know, Marco Martinez is actually a great friend of the promotion, somebody who actually helps us out and works with us. Fantastic person. I appreciate you calling in, Marco. I couldn't agree more, Marco, you know, and it's almost to the point. I mean, I was watching it tonight, and tell me if you could kind of understand my sentiment here. I was watching it tonight, Marco, and I was watching these opponents just get run through. And the first thing that kind of popped in my head was, man, boxing has become like WWE. It's become like wrestling. The only difference is you actually know who's supposed to win. With wrestling, at least, I mean, even though it's fake, at least sometimes there's a surprise as to who's going to win. With boxing, my guy, it's like, we know who's going to win. So it's actually less compelling in many ways than even wrestling. What do you feel about that opinion?
You know what my feelings are is you kind of brought that up, and I was thinking about this earlier. Here's what boxing's missing. All right, boxing has the biggest stars, right? They have The Rock and Steve Austin, and they have the Ric Flairs. They have that, the Tyson Furies, the Mayweathers, and stuff like. They got the big sellers. What they're missing is the Chris Jerichos and the Chris Benoits and the mid card is what they called it in wrestling. The
Well, we don't want any Chris Benoits, Marco.
Come on, he had a whole career before he went crazy, but you get it. They're missing the Razor Ramones. They're missing the guys that you watch that weren't quite always the guys on top, but it's the guys you could tune in every week, because you didn't tune in every. We're almost the same age, like you remember Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior. Hulk Hogan made a name for himself only wrestling 4 to 5 times a year. He wasn't wrestling matches every weekend. That was something that, let's say, Bret Hart was doing at that time. Mr. Perfect used to wrestle all the time. So they developed the mid card. Boxing, like right now, you can say, hey, yeah, did you check out Shakur Stevenson? He didn't have an opponent. There was no Mr. Perfect for Bret Hart. I mean, you got to have that. For Bret Hart to wrestle, he had to wrestle Mr. Perfect. You need someone like Shakur Stevenson to box guys that their names. They don't necessarily have to be good, but you got to be able to bring it up in conversation. And it's one thing the UFC does. They develop these guys that they're not going to really be the best. They're not. They don't have super talent that's going to put them over the mark. But I don't know if it's the investment they make in telling their backstory, or how they work with these other news organizations to promote their fighters and make the fighters available.
Absolutely.
So, like, they go on Arrow and they talk.
Marco, absolutely, Marco. The UFC is nonstop. I mean, look what they've got going on. They've got Embedded. They've got that, what is it, the agony of defeat, and they've got the slow-mo thing, and they've got nonstop media. They've got Ariel Helwani, on ESPN doing interviews with the guys. I mean, everywhere you turn on YouTube or on the internet, somebody's doing an interview, or the UFC's doing an Embedded, or some sort of countdown, or it's like every week they've got a new show. They've got a new one now for Daniel Cormier, where I guess he sits down and analyzes fights. I mean, the level of interaction that the fighters at the UFC have with their fans creates this emotional bond, man. It creates a connection with the fans. With boxing, they're still using this tired old formula, 99% of the time, where the guy goes in there, he fights, they do an interview right afterwards, and then it's over. And then you don't hear from the guy, you don't see the guy, you don't know anything about the guy until his next fight. But, if you look at the UFC, I mean, how many interviews,
right.
Have you opened up your internet? I mean, how many interviews have you seen with Jorge Masvidal lately? Kamaru Usman, Sean O'Malley? I mean, it's nonstop. Post-fight the post-fight press conferences, the pre-fight press conferences. It's so exciting. It's buzzing. With boxing, they're just not investing in that part of it. They're not investing in the show, and that's why you're bringing up guys like Mr. Perfect, Bret Hart. They're not investing in these guys, or they're not investing in the media necessary to get these guys' personalities out there for people to connect with them. Okay, and then the other thing you said is, the matches. Look, let's just be straight up here. Marco. These guys are not fighting guys that are on their level. They shouldn't be fighting these guys. No fight that happened tonight. Listen, who fought tonight? We had Stevenson, Caraballo, an incredibly, unfair mismatch. Incredibly unfair mismatch. Robesi Ramirez, a 2-time Olympic gold medalist, TKO'd Yuri Andajar in one round. It's a ridiculous mismatch. It's ludicrous. It's not even, you can't even, unless a person has absolutely no idea about fighting, would you consider these fights to be actually competitive fights. Guido Vianello won by TKO in one round against a guy in Donald Hainsworth who looks like my Amazon driver. Shout out to the Amazon driver. You know what I mean? I mean, Jared Anderson had the toughest opponent tonight. And at the end of the first round, or maybe halfway through it, the guy already looked like he didn't want to be there. He was already shaking his head and making these motions and showing you this body language of somebody that not only didn't want to be there, but somebody that didn't belong. Somebody that didn't belong, yeah. Marco. Now let's compare those 4 or 5 fights to the UFC card. Let's compare that to the UFC card.
Yeah.
I mean,
you can't even compare it.
You can't compare it because, in that UFC card, I mean, we're doing predictions for boxing. Listen, if I do predictions for boxing, I'm 100% more confident in my boxing predictions than I am in my MMA predictions because actual fights are getting made in the UFC. Even the biggest mismatch was Wineland O'Malley, in my opinion. That was probably the biggest mismatch.
Do they even take a betting line on let's say tonight's card? Would they even do a betting line?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Every boxing match. You go to Vegas, you go to the sports book, every boxing match in the universe is on there. But it's almost like it's not worth betting on. You know what I mean? It's the biggest mismatch in the UFC card. I take that back. Was Amanda Nunes versus Felicia Spencer. But even that, right. I mean, at least, Amanda Nunes is an exceptional fighter. No other female fighter is even close to her. It's not like there are other female fighters out there that are giving her a run for their money and the UFC is avoiding making those fights. They're just not available because there's just nobody as good as her. It's not like in boxing. I mean, there's
everybody.
Right. I mean, listen, there's 10 guys that can give Shakur Stevenson a run for his money right now, but they're not going to put him in there with them. They're not going to do it. And that's the key difference.
Right. It's an investment that Top Rank made in him, right? Because I'm sure Top Rank, that promoters in general, when they're on this level, they make an investment on these fighters, and they don't want to blow it on a regular ESPN card. They want to build them up so they can have big fights. And UFC misses the mark sometimes. But UFC, I don't know if you caught the undercard when Alex Caceres, a guy from Miami, fought Chase Hooper. Chase Hooper is an up-and-coming fighter. Chase Hooper, I think, is like 20 years old.
Right.
And he only has like 10 fights max. And Alex Caceres has like 20-some fights. And it was a weird fight to watch because that was someone that they've invested money in. They've had little commentaries by him, and they've done little vignettes for Chase Hooper, and then they put him in with this animal who just ate him up. And
so
UFC
but in all fairness, Caceres has been a bit up and down. He's inconsistent. It was a good fight. It was a good fight. But look, Chase Hooper lost that fight, but is he no longer a hot prospect?
Because they built him. You know who he is.
Right.
You want to watch him again.
But look, he's still going to be a hot prospect in the UFC because the UFC, the MMA culture is reasonable. And I mean reasonable. What I mean by reasonable is it's okay to lose. In boxing, for whatever reason, it's better to have a bullshit undefeated record against nobodies than it is to lose against a tough guy. Or at least that's what the promoters think because they're out of touch. I think
that's a good word right there, out of touch.
Right, but real fight fans are going to look at Chase Hooper like me. I'm going to look at Chase Hooper and I'm going to say, "Oh, it was a setback. No big fucking deal. He's still young." And you're supposed to lose in MMA. I mean, it's very fucking rare not to lose in MMA because they've made it okay to lose in MMA. And boxing is not okay to lose. Everybody you saw competing tonight, with the exception of Robesi Ramirez, who lost his first bout in what was probably a huge error. Everybody else you saw is undefeated. Shakur Stevenson, undefeated. Jared Anderson, undefeated. Guido Vianello, undefeated 7-0 with 7 knockouts. I mean, it's just these guys. These guys, I mean, are just most of them, with the exception of the Quantavious Cash fight, who I'm sure he's not a guy they're trying to invest a lot of money in. But with the exception of that fight, everybody's undefeated. I mean, everybody is undefeated. How can everybody be undefeated? Right. The only way everybody could be undefeated is if everybody's fighting a bunch of fucking nobodies. And that's what's happening. That's what's happening.
This is what makes me go back to my original comment about they're happy being the Clippers. They're making money. The Clippers were very profitable when they stunk. They sold enough tickets because they didn't invest any money in anything. To change boxing, it will be really expensive. It's going to take somebody. It can't happen overnight. It's going to take development. It's going to take money. It's going to take, you got to almost build from the ground up. You don't need to worry about the big guys. The big guys are going to be there no matter what. But you got to build from the ground up so you have the next up-and-coming class. And it'll happen. You'll have guys that are up-and-coming. But to me, I don't understand who would watch fights like tonight. It was hard to watch. It was nothing exciting to keep watching that for. I just watched it because I wanted to participate tonight, and I wanted to be current. I remember the reason I fell out of love with boxing, because I used to love boxing. It was my favorite. And this is my last point, and I'll get off.
You're good, Marco. You're good.
I first started covering boxing. I used to cover it from my Instagram page. Yeah. When I first started, I remember I got hooked up with this guy. His name's Ivan Delgado. Fights out of Golden Boy. At the time, he fought out of Golden Boy. He was with the Santa Cruz management team. So he was Leo Santa Cruz's high school friend. And he invited me to the gym. I went over there, was taking pictures at the gym. I met all the guys that worked out at SCNT. And it was a real cool experience. And then they said, hey, you want to come to our event? Leo Santa Cruz, who I like. Leo Santa Cruz is an exciting fighter. He was putting on his first ever promotion. And I had already gotten to know a lot of the fighters that were going to show up. So I was excited. I was like, cool. And it was his name of his promotion escapes me. But it was out in the IE, in the Inland Empire. And I go over there. And the night of the fight, and I'm excited, and there's all these guys I'm familiar with. I interviewed them and put them on my channel, and I couldn't wait to watch their fights. And I mean, they were the most lopsided, uncompetitive. They literally looked like they flew in bums from, like, none of the opponents spoke English. They were all from Mexico, and that's not a knock on them. I'm saying they brought in these nobodies, is my point. And they all just got ran over. And I was just thinking, it was such a letdown. It was like, who would want to, the tickets weren't free. The tickets were $60 each. Who would want to see that? I cannot tell you how much more exciting a Fighters Rep show when it was an MMA show or when it was kickboxing. It's not because of the rules. It was just always competitive. And here it is on the low level. And instead of having competitive fights that would be exciting to go see, they decided to have uncompetitive fights that I don't understand, other than, like you say, to pad their record. I didn't understand why they had those fights, because none of those fighters have made it since. So they've all struggled. And it was just like, well, if you would have had them in competitive fights, at least I'd know, hey, the next time they fight here, they were competitive in this fight, and it was fun to see. I never wanted to go see another fight after that with them because it was just unentertaining. I don't like run over fights. It's not fun.
Totally. And, could you imagine on the ESPN platform, Marco, if we had Milton Arguello versus John the Caveman Garcia, which was the main event for the last Fighters Rep event?
Here's my question. Before you continue, would you want to see Milton Arguello again?
You know what? I've reached out to try to speak to Milton Arguello a couple times. He's very hard to get a hold of. Some of these fighters are just they're a little bit different when it comes to technology. But I would love. Milton Arguello fought a hell of a fight against John Garcia, and even though he didn't win the fight at our last event, I would love to promote him again, man. He did that was a fantastic fight.
I mean, from a fan perspective, I would love to see him again. I want to see John fight, and I want to see Milton. Milton looked great that fight. That fight was a 50-50 fight until Milton, his legs gave out on him. But other than that, that was a 50-50 fight. I want to see him again. So that's my thing is you don't have to be a winner every time if it's competitive. Like, who's the other kid that lost? The other pro fight.
It was Anthony Workin, who also is a great fighter. I would love to have him back too.
That guy was a beast. The kid he fought was super. Like, it was a super competitive fight. And I would want to see, if you said Anthony Workin's fighting and the other guy wasn't, I wouldn't be mad. I wouldn't be like, oh, how come you put the loser on? It was somebody I wanted to see. We've had so many guys on FightersRep, and it's unfair probably because it's two different things. But I gotta say, Jesse kills it to get the fights together. Matchmaker. He puts on fights. The fights are so competitive, and you got the fighters are building themselves. So someone who's been here for each fight, I get to know him, like Chris Cross. I remember his first fight on FightersRep 2, and then he fought again on FightersRep 3. And when he lost, it was competitive though. It was like, remember, he was standing up and he was killing the guy, and then the guy would take him down and overpower him. And it was like, man, I can't wait to see him again. And he didn't fight for FightersRep again. But I know I can't wait. The next time he gets back in the ring, I'm going to watch him. It was just...
Yeah, man. Yeah, look, they think... Like what they think they're doing, and, I'm going to let you in on the mind of the promoters that are doing this. And I'm going to let you in on it because it's something I totally disagree with. It's a mentality I disagree with. They think they're building stars. By building up this, this 10-0 record against... tomato cans and guys who, street sweepers and I don't know what, they think they're building a star. Think about how naive you have to be to believe that a guy who's fighting nobodies, is a star because he beat a bunch of nobodies. And then this thing, the funniest part about it to me is when it backfires. That's the funniest part about it to me, because sometimes it backfires. I have a lot of respect for Deontay Wilder. I think he's a good, very good heavyweight fighter. But he's an example of how it backfired. Now, they did make a star out of Deontay Wilder, sort of, but he could have been a much bigger star. And it backfired on him because they thought that Tyson Fury was a tomato can. And that's why they took that fight. And then he got a draw that he didn't deserve, right? So the only way to rectify it at that point, the only way to rectify that issue at that point was to rematch Tyson Fury. And part of the problem was, they had him fight all these nobodies. He knocked them all out. And he developed this false confidence. He thought he can go in there with no boxing skills. He never tried working on his boxing skills to improve his fundamentals to the extent that he should have. And, he went into that Tyson Fury fight against a guy who'd been fighting real competition his entire life, for the most part. Of course, Tyson Fury took on some tomato cans too, but let's not forget, Fury fought Klitschko in Germany. Fury fought Chisora twice. Fury fought some people in his career. Fury had a competitive career, and Fury continued to improve his boxing in order to be the best. Wilder didn't. He just knocked people out, waiting, knocking people out. And I knew it was going to be a huge issue when he got in there the second time with Luis Ortiz, and he just stood around and didn't throw a single punch until the knockout punch. I said to myself, he cannot keep putting himself in a hole like this. He's not going to come out with a knockout every time. And, I predicted him to lose that Fury fight. And he did. And that's when it backfires on you. When you have a guy, he's fighting nobodies. He's not learning anything, right? He's not getting better. He's not learning anything. He's not getting better. He's developing false confidence. So the time comes where he fights somebody He fights somebody that knows how to fight, and he's fucked.
Yeah,
and that's what happened there.
What's weird with Wilder, and it happens with a lot of fighters that have a lot of talent and they're doing good, but I feel like they start getting controlled by people who make money off of them, and they're getting rich while they do it, so they don't mind. Another one who comes to mind is Danny Garcia, and Danny Garcia is a warrior. You know, when you put him in there, like some of those fights that he's been in, I mean, the guy doesn't have a crazy high talent level, but he's all heart when he fights. Like he'll throw that left hook out of it, you know, and knock people out. But Danny Garcia went through a period where they were putting him in there against bums, and he would come out talking smack like, "Oh, I'm the best there is," and it's like, you fought a guy I've never heard of. I remember the famous one that it was on Showtime. And it was just like, how did, Al Heyman was putting him in there against bumps, and he's still talking trash. So you almost put against him.
I'll say this about Danny Garcia, Marco. I actually thought Danny Garcia fought good competition. If you ask me what happened with Danny Garcia is, I feel like he has a lot of miles on the odometer. I feel like he may have aged quicker. It may have something to do with burning out too. He's been boxing his whole life, but Danny Garcia has fought a lot of really high level competition. He's actually, and look, you as an MMA fan mostly, I mean, you think that Danny Garcia hasn't really fought great competition, but if you were to look at it through the lens of a boxing fan, relatively speaking, compared to other boxers, he actually fought great competition. Like he actually really did.
No, hold on. I think I misspoke. I do think Danny Garcia fought the best. I think he's fought some of the best. How many losses? He doesn't have a lot of losses. He has like one or two, right? Like how many does he have? 3 at most?
I think he has. I think he has
and
one.
He fought
one to Keith Thurman, one to Sean Porter, and I think that might be it. He has 2 or 3.
Yes, and he fought the top guys. My point being was in between, like in the middle of some of those fights, he would fight guys with no names. Like, I can't remember the kid that they put him against. It was on a Showtime card. And it was when Al Heyman first took off, like when PDC was first taking off. And it was the first time that you realized, like, oh, okay, this guy owns Showtime, basically, and get away with murder, putting in these good fights. I'm a Danny Garcia fan, but when you see that, when you see a guy make millions off of a fight where he didn't fight anybody, like Adrian Broner kind of did this, where Adrian Broner was fighting guys who weren't A fighters or B level fighters.
Right.
He would whip them, make cash in, and talk all this trash, and then so when he lost, you'd be like, yeah, see, he's a bum, and I feel like that's what happened to Wilder. Because Wilder, he has some big wins. He has a great knockout. He has a great backstory. Have you ever seen his interview with Joe Rogan when he was on there for an hour?
Yeah, no, he definitely has a good backstory for sure.
The guy has a killer backstory. Boxed for a year and a half and was a bronze medalist. So he had the talent, but they started matching him up against guys who, I guess they did it from the beginning. He had like a 40-something record and never fought anybody until the last couple of years. But it was just, I think as a fan, you start to hold resentment. At least I do. Because you're like, man, I'm seeing this guy come out talking all this smack, and I know he's making millions, and he ain't fighting anybody that's worth fighting. And so when he loses, you're like, there, I can write him off.
Yeah.
And I think that's how Mayweather made all his money, but he kept winning. And even though he was fighting the best at it, he just makes you hate him. And if you can hate the guy, it works. But I don't know. It's just weird. I really wish boxing would invest in their fighters more instead of as a roster, not like in an individual, because they got the individuals. But either way, thanks for talking to me, George.
Yeah,
I'll talk to you later. All right, man.
Appreciate you calling in, brother.
Weekend, what's going on this weekend? Who's fighting this weekend?
Well,
I know in MMA it's Jessica I and Calvillo. That's a good fight.
We got that.
Who's in boxing?
We got that this weekend. As far as I know, we have Jesse Magdaleno on Thursday. So that's all I know so far. I haven't checked the boxing
How's that
schedule for
Jesse
the weekend.
Magdaleno fight? Is that worth tuning in, or is it going to be another one like this?
I mean, I'm a boxing fan. I'm gonna tune in all the time. I'll end up getting annoyed with the mismatch probably, but it won't be it won't be as bad as tonight. I don't think. I don't think it'll be as bad as tonight.
All right, George. You take care.
All right,
Check it
brother.
out.
Appreciate you calling in, Marco Martinez. That's our brother, man. Big shout out to him. Fantastic wife that he doesn't deserve. She also comes out, helps out at the shows. Much love to her. Guys, hit the like button if you're in here. Hit the subscribe button, the bell notification icon. Join Knucklehead Nation. Anything you guys donate to the channel or any shirts you get below. I really hope you guys get some shirts below. We also got hoodies, tank tops. It's getting hot, so you might want a hoodie or a tank top rather. But anything you guys donate or purchase on the channel is going to get reinvested right back into the promotion. It looks like we got another call coming in. Let me see. Oh, looks like we got another call coming in. It's not going through. I'm going to ask that you call back, brother. I see you calling in. I'm going to ask that you call back. Whoever that was. Just give me a call back. I didn't have a chance to get at it. I had closed the little dialer thing we got going on here. There it is. What's going on? Is this Kevin from Chicago?
Georgie.
What's going on?
How's it going?
I'm chilling, man. How are you, brother?
Pretty good. I want to talk some fights.
Did you watch that today?
No, I didn't watch the boxing fight. I actually missed it.
Well, you didn't miss much, brother.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I figured they kind of gave Shakur Stevenson a can.
Yeah, they handed out a 6-pack tonight, brother.
Yeah, that's what I figured. What I wanted to talk about was this Sandhagen, because a lot of people were talking about him like he was a phenom. I heard Brendan Schaub saying, "Oh man, this kid's a phenom." I used to train with him in Colorado, and man, this kid is a real deal. And I was skeptical. I was like, I don't know, man. I looked at a couple of his fights, and he kind of just skated by, squeaked by. I actually thought he lost even a couple of those fights to John Lineker and Rafael Sunsar, really close fights. Well, people were still on the bandwagon. They're saying he's going to be the next champ. But what happens? He gets ran over in like a minute by Aljo, taken down, choked out. So I want to get your thoughts on that. What do you think about that?
Man, Aljo's a strong guy, and Aljo's a guy who's always been good. He's seasoned. He's a veteran. And that means something in this sport, you know what I mean? Aljo's a guy who's good, man. He's been a little bit inconsistent, right? He did get caught, I think it was against Maurice. But, he's a really good fighter, and he's always been good. And Sandhagen was kind of this, new young guy coming up, and he got welcomed. He got welcomed to the division by Aljo. That's what happened. But, I mean, I don't think that means you can write Sandhagen off. I still think he's a talented kid. I think he'll be back.
Yeah, I can see that. I just don't. He's been beat by a big, strong wrestler before. I think in his record he's lost to a decision, Jamal Emmers, and he just recently got signed to the UFC, and he's a wrestler. So that might be a weakness. That might be a little chink in his armor, wrestlers. So
yeah, you might be right about that. I mean, it sounds like that's who he lost to, it sounds like he's going to have to work on that. And if I saw any difference in the two before the fight and in the fight, it was, Aljo definitely looked like the stronger guy. I mean, I think he used his physical strength to win that fight, which was smart.
Yeah, I mean, of course, and he's not a small guy. The dude's pretty big. He's tall, and he's a little bit on the thin side, but he's not like some Pipsqueak. He's not some like Chase Hooper looking dude. He's long and lean. He's got a little bit of muscle definition. I just think his skill set. He's one of those jujitsu guys. That's his game. Like people think jujitsu will get it done. You got to have a wrestling foundation. You got to be able to know how to stop a takedown, know positional. You can't just get taken down and then rely on throwing up a triangle and hopefully it'll save you.
I couldn't agree more, man. I've always thought, for years now, I mean, as far back as I can remember, I thought wrestling is the best base to have as an MMA fighter.
Absolutely. You see it time and time again against some of these guys that they look really good when you got them right matchups, but as soon as they run into the buzzsaw grinding wrestler type, someone like for example, Frankie Edgar versus Yair Rodriguez. Remember, Yair Rodriguez was running through people. People were saying he's the next best thing, and then what happens? Frankie Edgar takes him down and smashes him. Just makes him look like an absolute amateur. And the same can be said for someone like Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier was dominating dudes, knocking out people. And then what happens when he faces an elite wrestler? He gets manhandled and choked out. So you got to put these guys to the test. I'd like to see the same thing with Sugar Sean O'Malley. Like, yeah, he's looking really good against these strikers. But what happens when he faces Merab Deverselli? You know who that is, right?
Yeah.
He's the kind of guy that might challenge his style with going there and try to smother him. And I just like to see how he would do against someone like that style, because that's the thing that what makes Cody Garbrandt so good is he has the wrestling background. He was the state champion in Ohio. He's got that sprawl and brawl, and if he has the right mindset to fight smart, not getting in the slugfest, he's one of the most talented guys in the division.
Yeah, and I think that's
knockout.
And I think that's also what makes Justin Gaethje so compelling. It makes him such a good matchup for Khabib, and that's actually why I picked him to beat Tony Ferguson, because I felt like it was going to be a stand-up fight. I felt like Ferguson wasn't going to be able to get him down, and I felt like he wasn't going to be able to handle him on the stand-up.
Yeah, that's exactly what I agreed too. I thought Justin Gaethje was going to be a tough matchup for him. I thought maybe he would just wilt. His gas tank might not be able to hold up. That was the only concern I had. I thought maybe he's got really good hands. Maybe he could knock him out early. I just didn't think. I think the damage that he inflicted in those early rounds really was able to set the tone for the rest of the fights, where he was able to pick them apart. But yeah, I said the same thing about Dustin Poirier. Poirier, though, when he fought Khabib, with that, Poirier might be able to stop these takedowns, and he's got such good boxing. But what did Khabib do? He freaking ragdolled him, took him down really early, and there was no problem. But Justin Gaethje is a way better wrestler, though. But you really never know until you get in there with Khabib. It's something that not a lot of guys are used to. So based on his ability to stop the takedown.
Yeah, I think that's a tough fight for Khabib, man. I think that's a tough fight for Khabib. Justin Gaethje has really good defensive wrestling, so I'm excited to watch it. And, he's a guy that doesn't really give up or get tired, so that's another, I think, interesting aspect of that fight when it gets made. So that's all you got for me today, Kev?
I agree, definitely.
Hey, man.
What do you think about these bantamweights?
Which one?
Let's talk about these bantamweights real quick.
Oh, man. I mean,
this bantamweight's really starting to shape up. Henry Cejudo may have retired, but it's looking good, man. Yeah, Peter Yan's coming up. Aljamain Sterling's coming into form. Cody Garbrandt's back. You got Marlon Moraes sitting in there, who's as dangerous as ever. The dude is a little one-hit man. He can knock anybody out. Yeah, what's your thoughts on that division?
I think it's an awesome division, man. It kind of reminds me of when Klitschko got beat by Tyson Fury, how the heavyweight division in boxing kind of opened up. Now that, Cejudo's gone, this thing's really opened up. And I think probably right now Peter Yan might be the guy right now. But I think on any given day he can be beaten. And I like Sean O'Malley too, man. I think he might be the future of that division.
Yeah, I agree. I think Charlemagne. I can't count on Aljamain Sterling either, because the way he was able to rag out Corey Sandhagen, who everybody was real high on. I wasn't too high on. I was still skeptical. I was skeptical, and my skepticism paid true, because he didn't look good. He didn't look good. So I think he's got some work to do in the wrestling department. But it will be interesting to see if Sterling can get a hold of Peter Yan, because Peter Yan doesn't come from a wrestling background. I think he comes from a boxing background, but he is a Russian, and those Russians know how to wrestle. So he's training with all the right people down at Tiger Muay Thai. Frank Hickman, George Hickman, those are some good wrestlers. I think that's the most exciting matchup for me at 135. Peter Yan versus Aljamain Sterling. And I'd like to see Cody Garbrandt versus Marlon Moraes. Those are two real high-level 135-pound matchups. So who do you got?
Yeah, I mean, those are really fun, man. I would say right now I got Yan, and if I were to have to pick between Garbrandt and Maurice, that's a tough one, man. That's a tough one. I would probably pick. So before Saturday, I would have definitely picked Maurice. But I think right now I'm leaning more towards Garbrandt, because I think he went back to the style that suits him, which is the boxing style, to hit and not get hit. You know what I mean? I think whenever he was trying to go in there and mix it up with people, that's when he was getting clipped and getting knocked out. But I think as long as he keeps moving and he's elusive and he uses his speed and his quickness, which he has in spades, and uses his counter punching, you know, I think he's very hard to beat. I think he beats Maurice. What do you think?
That's a good analogy, or a good prediction. The only thing a lot of people mistake is they think Cody Garbrandt he rushes in and gets crazy. But the reason he rushed in and got crazy against Pedro Munoz was because he was getting his legs chewed up. He was getting that lead leg destroyed by Munoz. He was chopping him away. And it was similar to another fight, Jan Blachowicz versus Thiago Santos. Thiago Santos was chopping at that leg. And what happens? Well, fighters, they panic. I can't just sit here and keep getting my leg torn apart. I got to go in there and make something happen. And what happens when he goes in there and makes something happen? They get knocked out. So people think Cody just rushed in real quick. No, man, he was getting his leg tore up, and then that's forced a knockout. So he check the leg kicks, be smart, and then just be patient on the outside. But I totally agree. When he does that, he's real dangerous, real quick. But Maurice may be able to cause some problems with leg kicks. That could be an issue for Garbrandt.
We'll see what happens, man. Hopefully,
I want to.
Go ahead.
Yeah, agreed. We'll see what happens. My last point. How about this? Huisman versus Burns. Teammates are about to fight. And
that's going to be a good
freaking
fight.
Burns is a gangster, dude.
Yeah,
Burns is a gangster. He didn't care.
That's going to be a good fight. Well, of course, I mean, yeah, he's not going to care. The guy wants to be champion, you know. So I can understand that, man. And ATT is that's a huge gym. I actually lived right next to it when I lived down in South Florida. And I've been there. It's a massive gym. So, I mean, a lot of people train there. You can expect for a lot of people to kind of, you know, eventually have to fight each other because it's such a big gym full of so much talent. But, yeah, I mean, sometimes I guess you got to fight your teammate. That's what happens in the sport. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Should be a good fight.
Not ATT. That's Hard Knocks.
Hard Knocks. Right, Hard Knocks. My bad.
That's an even smaller gym, so it's an even a little bit crazier. Like, because Huisman and Burns were like main training partners, And Burns came right out right away. Nah, I want to fight Usman. Sign me up. I'm ready to go. It's like Usman was getting him ready for that Woodley fight. So
hey, I mean,
they got no problem. They're ready to go.
That's what they're in this for, to become champs, my man. So I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, the same here. I think Burns has a really good chance of winning that fight. I really like him to win that fight. He's got that explosive hands. His striking has been looking on point. And if Colby Covington can hurt Usman, Burns can hurt Usman. I think I got Burns for the upset. I think he's going to be a decent underdog, and I'm going to pick Burns for that upset. What do you think?
I don't think that's a bad prediction, man. Based on what I've seen, I would agree. The only thing that kind of makes me hesitate is Usman's so good, man. I haven't seen him really lose. He doesn't look like, he can be beat when he's in there, but, based on what I've seen from Burns, I do feel like he has the recipe, man. Like you said, real heavy hands, explosive enough, good ground game, good wrestling. He's probably used to Usman, so it's a good fight.
Really good fight.
All right, Kevin. George. Well, I appreciate you calling in, brother. I'm about to shut this thing down. I can't believe I've been on this thing for an hour and 16 minutes already, man. I appreciate you guys joining me here.
I appreciate you waiting up, taking the call late at night, man.
For sure, brother. Have a great one.
Okay, you too.
Kevin from Chicago, ladies and gentlemen. Knuckleheads, hit the subscribe button, the bell notification icon next to it. Join Knucklehead Nation. Get your shirt in the link below. Help me continue to promote and support these fighters. That's all I've got for you guys today. Good performance by Shakur Stevenson, but expected, against abysmal competition, and that's what we saw throughout the night. Anyway, Knuckleheads, like, comment, share this video. Support the channel, support the grind. I'm working hard on this, man. I appreciate you guys helping me. Until next time, keep it clean. We'll go live immediately after the fights on Thursday.